The Paris Agreement is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, on climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finance. Signed in 2016, the agreement's language was negotiated by representatives of 196 state parties at the 21st Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC in Le Bourget, near Paris, France, and adopted by consensus on the 12th of December 2015. Of the very few UNFCCC member states which have not ratified the agreement, the only major emitters are Iran and Turkey. The United States withdrew from the agreement in 2020, but officially rejoined on the 19th of February 2021. The Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal is to keep the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, recognizing that this would substantially reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. This should be done by reducing emissions as soon as possible, in order to achieve a balance between anthropogenic emissions by sources and removals by sinks of greenhouse gases in the second half of the 21st century. It also aims to increase the ability of parties to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change, and make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. Under the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan, and regularly report on the contribution that it undertakes to mitigate global warming. No mechanism forces a country to set a specific emissions target by a specific date, but each target should go beyond previously set targets. The aim of the agreement is to decrease global warming described in its Article 2, enhancing the implementation of the UNFCCC through holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change, increasing the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change and foster climate resilience and low greenhouse gas emissions development in a manner that does not threaten food production, making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. Countries furthermore aim to reach global peaking of greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible. The Paris Deal is the world's first comprehensive climate agreement. The contributions each country should make to achieve the worldwide goal are determined by that country and are called nationally determined contributions. Article 3 requires them to be ambitious, represent a progression over time, and set with the view to achieving the purpose of this agreement. The contributions should be set every 5 years and are to be registered by the UNFCCC Secretariat. Each further ambition should be more ambitious than the previous one, known as the principle of progression. Countries can cooperate and pool their nationally determined contributions. The intended nationally determined contributions pledged during the 2015 Climate Change Conference serve, unless provided otherwise, as the initial nationally determined contribution. While the NDCs themselves are not binding, the procedures surrounding them are, and greenhouse gas inventory figures in standard format to the UNFCCC by 2024 and every 2 years after that. Under the Paris Agreement, countries must increase their ambition every 5 years. To facilitate this, the agreement established the Global Stocktake, which assesses progress, with the first evaluation in 2023. The outcome is to be used as input for new nationally determined contributions of parties. The Talanoa Dialogue in 2018 was seen as an example for the Global Stocktake. After a year of discussion, a report was published and there was a call for action, but countries did not increase ambition afterwards. The stocktake works as part of the Paris Agreement's effort to create a ratcheting up of ambition in emissions cuts, because analysts agreed in 2014 that the NDCs would not limit rising temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. The Global Stocktake reconvenes parties to assess how their new NDCs must evolve so that they continually reflect a country's highest possible ambition. While ratcheting up the ambition of NDCs as a major aim of the global stocktake, it assesses efforts beyond mitigation. The 5-year reviews will also evaluate adaptation, climate finance provisions, and technology development and transfer. An April 2020 study showed that implementation of current policies leaves a median emission gap of 22.4 to 28.2 GTCO2 EQ by 2030, with the optimal pathways to implement the well below 2 degrees Celsius and 1.5 degrees C Paris goals. If nationally determined contributions were to be fully implemented, this gap would be reduced by a third. The countries evaluate